Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be looking at DPS special weapons. Now the first question that many people might have is what even is a DPS special weapon? Because in most cases it's better to use your heavy ammo to do DPS. Well, similarly to legendary heavy weapons, legendary special weapons also want a similar role, where you have a magazine or reloading perk in the third column and a damage perk in the final column. What those perks actually are depend greatly based on the weapon and the situation that you're in. However, that is common on pretty much any DPS god role. Now, why might you actually use a special weapon for DPS over a heavy weapon? And there's two main reasons. The first one is that you want to use it during downtime while you're shooting your heavy weapon, or if you're going to be using it when you're out of heavy ammo. The other main reason is if you're using a debuffing heavy weapon such as Tractor Cannon or a buffing weapon such as Gjallarhorn to help your teammates out. Players using Tractor Cannon or Gjallarhorn are still capable of dealing several million damage to almost any raid boss in the game. So now that we understand why you might use a special weapon, let's talk about what the good special weapons are. The current special weapons in the game include shotguns, sniper rifles, grenade launchers, fusion rifles, glaives, and trace rifles. We can pretty much immediately kick out glaives and trace rifles because they are just simply not designed for DPS, leaving the remaining four options here. The first and strongest option we're going to look at is shotguns. Shotguns are pretty much the most powerful option because, simply put, they have the most damage per shot and don't lose any fire rate. Their downside is instead in their range, however that can be easily accounted for. In the majority of raid situations, it is not hard to set yourself up close to a boss, and thanks to things like Well of Radiance for immense healing, survivability is not a problem. As for bosses that you can't set up right next to, we have the LUNAFACTION's boots, which allows you to double the range of every weapon that you have on the team. If you didn't know, when you're in an Empowering Rift or a Well of Radiance, the LUNAFACTION boots will actually double the range of everybody's weapons standing in it. This means that pellet shotguns go from an effective range of about 5 meters up to 10, and slugs go from about 10 to 20, and that fusion rifles can go from about 16 to over 30. It's unfortunate that LUNAFACTION boots are not a more common part of most raid teams because they are actually an extremely powerful way to increase a lot of players' damages without them even realizing. There are two main kinds of shotguns in the DPS context, and that is rapid fire shotguns and swap shotguns. Pretty much every archetype except for precision frames have a effective use in DPS. Rapid fire shotguns are great because they only need one slot and still put up very good DPS, but obviously have lacking total damage compared to that of two shotguns of another archetype. You can however do swaps using slug shotguns, aggressive frames, or lightweight frames. To do a shotgun swap, you'll need to have two shotguns of the same archetype, either lightweight, aggressive, or precision slug, and then you will fire one shotgun and then switch after every shot. So you will go back and forth between the two on every shot. This allows you to shoot both weapons at their maximum fire rate at the same time, effectively doubling your DPS. Next up, we'll look at fusion rifles. Fusion rifles are pretty similar to shotguns, however they have a charge-up time and deal similar damage per shot. This results in much less damage, however they have an improved range, and they don't require crits to deal more damage. Fusion rifles also have a suite of interesting damage perks such as Controlled Burst and Reservoir Burst. The real use of a fusion rifle in many settings is going to be very easy and simple damage, however they are much harder to use in a swap context and again have much lower DPS than shotguns. For any ideal fusion rifle, you're trying to reduce the charge time as much as possible, simply because this increases the rate of fire, which is almost always better than increasing the damage when it comes to DPS. Another choice we have are grenade launchers. Grenade launchers are interesting because they are the least committal special weapon of all of them. This makes them great as filler for other weapons, which is the primary use of a special weapon in many rotations. Because of this, these are not going to be a great option to pair with Tractor or Gjallarhorn, but are instead going to be used with damage heavies like the Apex Predator. The current best grenade launcher for damage is the Wilderflight. However, I don't own that dungeon, so I am not showing it off here. I'm instead showing off the Empty Vessel, which is definitely the second best. An ideal swap grenade launcher is going to have auto-loading and frenzy, with Vorpal as a secondary perk here. This is because Vorpal weapon doesn't apply unless the weapon is being held. So in a grenade launcher's case, the Vorpal weapon buff will actually not be applied because in most cases you're swapping off the grenade launcher before it actually hits. I personally find myself using grenade launchers the least when it comes to most of my swapping setups. However, the most common time that I do use it is when I'm doing IZANAGI swapping. And finally, we have snipers. Snipers are probably going to be the least used damage option on this list, however they still have an important part in some situations, especially the Supremacy, which has even more unique applications using kinetic tremors. When it comes to a DPS sniper, you almost always want to have a rapid fire frame. There are some situations where you might use an aggressive frame instead to be able to one-shot certain objectives such as Nezarek's shoulders. However, when it comes to just putting out damage, rapid fires, and for the most part, just do it better. As is the case with any DPS god roll, you are looking for a magazine or a reload perk in the third column and a damage perk in the fourth. The only real time you're going to be using a sniper is when a boss is outside of the range of using a fusion rifle, or if you have a sniper rifle setup which can do more damage than fusion rifles. The main exception to snipers not being a very common use case is going to be IZANAGI'S Burden. This is because it allows you to combine 6 shots into 1 at the cost of 4 ammo, allowing it to be an extremely big spike of damage in any setup. The most common application of this is going to be Izzy rocket swapping, which is also one of the easiest rotations in the game, and is a great first rotation for anybody to learn how to do. Another huge use of a sniper is going to be in a bait and switch rotation, where you are outside of the range of shotguns, even if a fusion rifle could technically be used. Because of the charge time of a fusion rifle, it makes it take longer to set up bait and switch for something like a heavy weapon, which is pretty much the best perk in the game for dealing damage at the moment. Because of this, I really only recommend using fusion rifles against bosses which you cannot crit, or you will have a very hard time hitting crits on. While snipers do less damage than shotguns, they still have a place in the game by having nearly infinite range, allowing them to work in pretty much any situation technically. This last part, I want to specifically talk about the Supremacy with kinetic tremors, and also the Supremacy with bait and switch, because it is pretty much the best sniper for any use of a sniper right now. This sniper has 2 main god rolls that you can pick out from right now, and that is rewind rounds, mixed with either kinetic tremors or bait and switch. I personally prefer kinetic tremors for most cases because I don't find myself in a lot of situations where I need to just dump one sniper, and if I do end up in a situation where I want to dump one sniper, I would prefer to use Sissing to keep kinetic tremors going, and then use an energy slot sniper which matches my heavy weapon to deal the most damage possible. You have enhanced kinetic tremors on the Supremacy, it only needs 2 shots to proc, making it a 60% buff to your weapon's damage, which is the highest in the game for any constant damage buff right now. The only downside being that it has a cooldown in that you cannot reproc kinetic tremors until the current kinetic tremor is gone. This means that it is best used similarly to Witherboard, where you apply the kinetic tremors and then shoot using your other weapons in the downtime. Similarly to Witherboard, you can also not have multiple players proccing kinetic tremors at the same time. If you've made it to the end of the video, I want to thank you for watching through the whole thing, and if you haven't already, I would definitely appreciate it if you subscribed, liked, and left me a comment on what you want to see next.